All right, good morning, everybody, and welcome to our 30-minute Thursday, Leading with Compassion. And this presentation is being brought to you by Dominic Cranrip. He's the director at the Antigo Public Library, and I'm Jamie Machik with the Wisconsin Valley Library Service. We're happy you were able to join us this morning. This is a short presentation, 30 minutes. So, Dominic, whenever you're ready, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Jamie, for the opportunity. I was at the WAPL keynote speech that Lance Werner gave entitled Better Libraries and Stronger Communities Through Kindness, Empathy, and Love. And it really struck a chord in me, but I overheard later in the hallway that taking guts to be kind sounded too mushy or too touchy-feely. So I wanted to rephrase that and say, having the courage to be patient, fair, and consistent with your employees, that's what's really important about leadership. And how does being patient, fair, and consistent apply to staff training, management, and your leadership? So we're going to cover a couple of things here, building your team, leading your team, and then what to do when things go sideways. So some things to think about are, what do you do as a leader to empower your team? How do you support them and grow them? What's your communication style with your team? How do they communicate back with you? And how does your leadership influence your team and the public's perception of the library? Your job as a leader is to see potential in your team and help your team reach that potential. Your team is your biggest asset. It's also your biggest expense. In college these days, students are being taught to seek out a new change in position or an upward move every 5 to 7 years, which isn't very long to develop and grow somebody in the grand scheme of things, considering they're probably going to be in the workforce for 40 plus years. Your influence is going to make a big difference where they are and how your library operates. 50% of your employees are going to stay because of life changes. That means they're going to meet a partner in your community, they're going to have kids in your community, something else is going to anchor them there. Everybody else is going to move along. So as a leader, if you want to retain your other 50%, you have to make sure that you're investing in them. And when they finally do move along, you want their next employer to call you and say, this is the best teammate I've ever had. You really made an influence on them and they talk about you. So that's your job as leaders, to put some good back out into the world. So we want our libraries to remain strong and be strong in the future. So there's 7 things that employees say that they want from their employer. There's a few different lists out there on the internet, ranging from 5 to 10 items. They all seem to fit within these 7 categories, however, and mostly in this order. So the first 2, work-life balance and flex time, that's totally within your control with your library hours and with your staffing. That's something that you can give to your employees fairly easily in the grand scheme of things. Number 3 is leadership, and that's all on you. As leaders in the library world or potential leaders in the library world, this is where your influence is really going to be felt. So, and then 4, 5, and 6 is all about investing in your teammate while they're with you. You're going to make sure that they go to continuing education. You're going to make sure that you give them opportunities to grow within your organization. And that's really it in a nutshell. But remember that if you're not supporting your team, your patrons won't feel supported, because the people that you have working on your front desk and are patron facing, if they're not supported, they don't see a reason to invest their time and money back into your library. So we want to make sure that we're investing in them. Money always ranks last on this list, and that's okay. That's really nice for us, actually, with these tight budget years. That's our benefit. But But remember, everything above that is fully within our power to give our teammates. So it all starts with hiring. We want to make sure that we're hiring people that are professional, that are emotionally intelligent. Those are my top two things when I'm hiring somebody. If they may be short on a skill set for a given job description, that's okay. I can teach skills. I have staff here within the library that can help me teach those skills if they're lacking in an area. What's really hard to change is those soft skills. Faking it as patron facing or as a leader, that's going to burn you out really fast. It's going to not put a good spin on the rest of your team. So make sure you hire people that are genuine. And when you hire somebody new, think of it as an opportunity to learn something. It's an opportunity to learn something about your organization when they come in there with these fresh, new, bushy-eyed tail eyes. And it's an opportunity for you to learn something as a leader. So I want to make sure that we're leveraging their previous histories. Supporting your team starts day one with training. Marketers expect people to remember a slogan after hearing it between 7 and 20 times. So if you're going through your training and you're thinking to yourself, this person just isn't getting it because you're giving them verbal instructions, there is a reason for that. So written instructions are a huge priority, and they should also explain the why things are done. Give them some background and some details on why you developed this procedure. We want to make sure that we're giving your team the tools they need to be successful. So as you're going through training, ask them what they need. Make sure you're asking them all the time if you're going too slow or if you're going too fast and what they need from you. Also, we want to make sure that your new team person is asking you questions. If they're not asking you questions, I really start to get nervous. I think to myself, are they getting this training? Are they understanding where I'm going? Those kind of things. And if your answer to any of their questions is, well, it's always been done that way, it's really time to take a look at your policies, your procedures, your way of doing things and saying, why do we do it that way? What's the why behind this training? Why are we doing it that way? Is there a better way to do it? So you want to develop goals with your new teammate and learn together. Learn what their strengths are. Learn where you could be better as a leader. So as we're asking all of these questions, we want to make sure that we're communicating any changes that we decide to implement in our training process or in our procedures. And we want to make sure that we're communicating these changes with all of our staff. Nothing speaks more poorly about your library if a patron comes to the desk and they know more about a given service or a given procedure than your employees do. So make sure everybody is well trained, well communicated with, and do your best to meet your teammates' needs. We want to make sure that we empower our staff to manage these changes. Give them the why on why we're changing, on how we're changing, and how this change came about in the first place. You might find during your conversations that there's a better way to make a change. And we want to be sure that our teams are able to manage change so they can respond better to our patrons. The more informed, the more educated our staff is, the more we invest in them, the more we're going to be perceived in the community as a leader within our community, and it'll build more positive community relationships. Excuse me, I need a drink. One of the things I like to do as a leader is leverage my team for some joint decision making. I hire my staff for their strengths. That's why they're there. I want to make sure that I'm utilizing them. If something comes up, I ask their opinion. I say, what do you think of this change? How can we do this better? Is there something that you need? We want to make sure that their strengths are so strong that they totally overshadow any potential weakness they may have as an individual, and your team takes up the slack by working well together. If you do consensus decision making, remember that you're never going to get 100%, but 80% is totally achievable. I think the only time you're going to get 100% consensus is if you are the only librarian in your library. So leadership is about sharing yourself, the expertise that you've gained from making mistakes. It's not directly about you and your mistakes, it's about your team. What mistakes are they making? What strengths do they have? And how do you inspire confidence within your team? Ask them what they need from you. Woody Allen says showing up is 80% of life, but really showing up is 100% for your staff. So make sure that you're showing up for them. Be fully present from when you walk in the door to when you leave. And don't be afraid to give power or authority to your team. It makes you a stronger leader when you demonstrate that you trust them. So demonstrating compassionate leadership doesn't mean you're a pushover. It means approaching situations with a positive, professional mindset and being authentic to yourself. If you're a funny person, make sure that your jokes are PC. If you're an introvert, make sure that you're still making those efforts to communicate with your team, to communicate with your community. If it's not face-to-face, do email, do blogs, you can do social media, whatever works for you and your team. So if somebody on your team really needs that FaceTime, make sure that you're showing up for them, that you're demonstrating to them that you care about growing them. And listen to your team for feedback. How is your communication working for them? How is your communication about changes within the library being reflected within the community? We want to make sure that we're trying to be positive even when times are tough. That's very important. It sends a strong message to your community and a strong message to your team that you can take it, they can keep moving on. As a leader, we're here to help our teams just like they help our patrons. They're the same. We're going to try to treat our staff the same way or similarly to the way that we treat the public. If we are very supportive when we're public facing, but not very supportive to our staff, they're going to note that. And we want to make sure that our internal clients, our teams, are as important or more important than our external clients, than the patrons that come up to the desk. The more supportive we can be for our team, the more we ask them how we can help, how we can make their jobs better, the better they'll be able to interface with our patrons and make sure that they're having a positive experience within the library. So how can we help our employees succeed? This is the tough question. You have to ask yourself it every day that you go into the library. What can I do to help? We want to encourage your team to come to you with solutions, to come to you with ideas, to come to you with problems, and help them manage those situations. Also, we want to make sure that we're feeding our team's passions. If a teammate comes to you with an idea for a new program, how can we get them to implement that program? Or how can we make sure that they're reaching their potential? And in turn, that'll help the library reach its potential. So we help our team become better by being better ourselves. We're going to say no to some things, which is okay. We don't want to say yes to everything. We want to be efficient with our time and with our resources. The services that we offer as a library should be top-notch and marketed. If you don't have time to market a program, you probably shouldn't be doing it. Marketing is half or to 3/4 of your program. If nobody knows that it's going on, then they're not going to come. So we want to make sure that we're marketing our services, that we're being vocal in our community, putting out press releases, Facebook, and doing word of mouth marketing with the patrons that come into the library to let them know about things that are going on. That means we have to have realistic expectations for yourself and for your team. If you add a program, see what program you can stop doing. And you want to be consistent with what you expect out of your team. They should know you well enough as a leader and as a person that they can guess what you're going to say. So if they come into a situation with a patron, they can think to themselves, well, I really think my boss or my leader is going to say this. And that'll help you be consistent with your marketing and with your behaviors. Your behavior as a leader influences your workplace's culture and the way the library is seen in the community. So if you go out for training as a group and you don't use the city's credit card to pay for lunches that you've budgeted as a line item, then nobody else, when they go out for continuing education, is going to want to use their credit card, use the credit card either. So you set the tone for these things. If you are leaving early every day, your team is going to want to leave early every day. So be consistent and lead by example. That'll also help with your patron interfacing. To say, well, Mr. Johnson came in and he was, as an example, Mr. Johnson comes in, he needs help with the copier, and you're very nice to him, there's no problem, you have a little bit of chit chat, everything goes smoothly. But when Mr. Smith comes in, you're grumpy with them, or you give them a different attitude. We want to be consistent. Even though somebody might not be familiar with you, you still want to treat them compassionately and with professionalism. And that'll set a good example for your staff to do the same. So how can we empower our staff? One is to clearly communicate your library's mission and vision. They shouldn't be super wordy. They should be easy for people to remember. A lot of times we get bogged down in our strategic plans, but keep them simple. We want to be able to use these things as bullet points for our marketing and for the way that we're interfacing with the community. You won't go on a trip without a map, so your team needs to know where you're going and how you're going to get there. And one of the ways that we can get there is to encourage self-improvement. That's for yourself and that's for your staff. Getting outside the library opens the door to improve your services and procedures and an opportunity for staff to improve themselves, all of which you want to have. You want to be able to also cross-train staff positions that will help develop your team, make them stronger. If people know how to do certain things when somebody's out of office or somebody is out sick, that means that your services to your patrons are going to remain top-notch. So cross-training is super important. And going along with cross-training is to delegate responsibility. You want to give your team the opportunity to take on new responsibilities so they can show you what they have, what they can do. Being a leader is all about being giving. You're going to give staff the authority to make decisions. You're going to support them when they make those decisions. You're going to give them credit when they make those decisions, and you're going to give them good, solid feedback afterwards. You want to make sure that you're supporting your staff when they make those decisions. If there a problem arises with the decision-making process, that's okay. That's what feedback is for later. Make sure that when you're giving feedback, you ask yourself, how would I tell this to someone that I respect? You respect your staff, you respect your team, you respect your patrons. They may drive you crazy, but you still respect them. So make sure that we're thinking about a positive way to spin your feedback. Leadership is always about supporting. It's never about being about doing it through coercion. You don't want to manipulate your staff. You want to support them to be stronger. So what do we do when we've delegated these responsibilities? We've given our employees the opportunities to make decisions. So when things go sideways, one, you're the leader. You take responsibility for your team's decisions. That's your job. You can always go back and analyze the interaction later with your staff. That's okay. That's good. You want to walk your staff through the decision-making process. How did you get to that decision in the first place? And you want to do it right away. Be considerate. Take them back in your office. Have them break it down for you. Maybe something happened. Maybe they're having an off day. Maybe they know all the steps mentally, but they are having a hard time putting it into action. And if we can break down the interaction into stop doing X because it affects Y, that helps peel out the process so they can picture it a little better. And we want to make sure that we're giving alternatives to their decision-making process. If a patron is getting hot, or another teammate is getting, or your one teammate is getting uptight with another teammate, break it down. Give them alternatives for how they can behave together and interact well together. You want to think to yourself when you go into these, what would be helpful to have your team change that behavior? Analyze where the communication breakdown happened and see what we can do to give alternatives there. And when we're giving alternatives, be sure that we're being consistent with our communication. We want to make sure that we're treating our staff equitably and fairly and giving them opportunities to improve. So when we have a difficult conversation with a patron or with a staff person, once we've delegated and given responsibility and empowering them to make all these choices, if something goes wrong or we're not seeing the changes that we want to see, we want to prepare for that conversation. We want to have a script ready, and we want to have a document. That means document the history of how you got to this point and document what you're going to do going forward. We want to frame any expected changes positively. We want to make sure that we're framing it as an opportunity to be better, because that's what we want for our staff. That's what we want for our team, is to be better. And we want to stay focused on the interaction and be professional. We don't want to sandwich good, bad, good. Neurologists say that we only remember the last 5 minutes of a conversation. So if your last 5 minutes is good chit chat, they're not going to remember the point of the whole meeting, the quote unquote bad part that's in the middle. We want them to focus on the change that we want them to make. And being patient with a staff person doesn't make you weak. It doesn't make you a chump. It makes you a strong leader. You want to give them opportunities to be better and make sure that they know that this is an opportunity to be better. When we're having this conversation, do not use absolutes, always and never. Nobody always does something. Nobody never does some other thing. It's just physically, statistically impossible to always or never do something. So as we're going through all of our goals, you want to make sure that we're developing reasonable expectations that you and your staff person agree upon in order to further their personal developmental goals and the library's goals. Have to keep those things together. Probably the hardest thing to do as a leader is to be open to changing yourself. One of the tools I like to use are 360 evaluations. That's where my staff will evaluate me as a leader. I ask them questions that make me feel uncomfortable, and that's okay. I want honest answers from them about how my leadership affects them, how my leadership is affecting the library. I want those answers. That makes me better. And I want to be a better leader for my team and for my library. So if there are mistakes, you've made them, take responsibility for them. You've done it, say you've done it, move along, and put them in perspective. We learn way more from our mistakes than we learn from our successes. So every mistake is an opportunity to learn more, to be a better leader. We want to be brave and open to try new things. Again, we're leading by example for our team. We're setting a good example for them. We're telling them what to do. We've had written instructions for them what to do. We talk to them every day about what we can do better as a team, as a library, to be better in our community and internally. And if something makes you uncomfortable, just remember, no good story ever started with a glass of milk, except this one. So leadership can never really be taught. It's the price we pay as leaders that we're gonna screw up, but we need those experiences to grow as individuals, to grow as leaders, and to be better for our team. And how do we help ourselves and help our teams? We learn from our experiences. Every opportunity where something goes wrong is an opportunity to learn. And our job as leaders is to communicate our mistakes, which have turned into wisdom, in a way that our team can utilize. So we're talking to our teammate. If you see a mistake that you've made in the past, you can say, I totally get it. I relate. I've been in your shoes. This is how I handled it. You know, try to give advice if the situation is appropriate. That being said, sometimes people need to learn from their own mistakes. That's okay too. You want to give your team an opportunity to learn, to become stronger leaders, to be stronger individuals. That'll only help you. Thank you. And is there any questions or comments?
All right, thank you, Dominic. And as he just said, we do have a few minutes if anyone has any questions or comments that they want to make. I did post a question in the chat box earlier in the presentation when Dominic was talking about hiring and what he looks for. I posed the question, you know, what about all of you? What do you look for if you are in that position with hiring? What do you look for when you hire? What do you focus on? And if you have any thoughts on that, please type it in the question box. I'd love to share that. So a question that came in, Dominic, when you were talking about the 7 to 20 times where you said how a message has to stick, marketers say a message has to stick. They have to hear something. We have to hear something 7 to 20 times to get something to stick. So now that you know this, and as a library director, as a leader, has that changed your method of training, or has that given you a better understanding as to if a staff member forgets something, or do you place more emphasis on writing things down and doing the verbal instructions, or so how has that affected how you train?
So one of the first things that I like to do is have a solid training document written down that everybody can refer to later or during their training, because some things only come up, you know, once a month. Some things come up every other week, but have something there that they can refer to. And when you're going through the training, you're going to find pieces in this document that maybe have changed in the last 2 months. Maybe they changed last week because you revised your policy. So it's about thinking to yourself, I can't be 100%, but how can I make it better? Like, oh, we need to change this. This is something that we changed in a policy. I didn't get a chance to make the changes in the training document. And when you're going through the training, sometimes you'll get those questions from your new hire, and they'll be like, well, why does it do it this way? When I worked at this library, this is how we did it instead. Again, that's your opportunity to learn something. Or maybe the verbiage in your training document just needs to be tweaked a little bit, or the software has changed, add a different image in there. But I really like to have a written document. So even though we're talking all the time during training, having that written thing that they can refer to is very valuable to them. I've had staff people take it home. Part of the training that I go through with the written documentation is to have them make notes on the training document and bring it back to me so I can say, yep, here it is. This is the tweak we need to make. This makes sense. This is how we can be better.
Great, thank you. One of the things so you mentioned that this presentation is loosely based on the keynote that was given at the WAPL conference, and I was at the conference, and I remember one thing that Lance said. He told this story how he had a really, really great employee who was really, really good at what she did, like just awesome, highly skilled, highly intelligent, but wasn't nice to her coworkers, didn't get along with other people, and unfortunately that person had to be let go from the library. And so do you have any thoughts on that, or is that something that you think we need to think more about as leaders?
I think that's something we definitely need to think about as leaders, and that's why attitude and emotional intelligence for me always ranks higher than a specific skill set. Nothing is going to spoil your team faster than a bad apple. So when we're hiring, we want to think to ourselves, this is actually in my hiring matrix, how is this person going to fit in with the team? Who are they going to relate to that's on our team, that's going to make our team stronger? So yeah, otherwise you're talking about a long process with EAP, and that's no fun for anybody either.
What is EAP?
Employee assistance programs.
Okay.
Almost every municipality should have some resource for that, either through their HR department or somehow, so that you get some professional guidance on what to do about employees that's completely and totally confidential, and they work for your municipality, they work for you. So it's really an untapped resource if there is something like that that you need help with, and they can help your employee as well. So I really encourage potential leaders to look out for their EAP provider.
Awesome. Someone asked if you have, and we can talk about this after the program today, do you have sample training documents that you might be willing to share with the group?
Absolutely.
Great. So what we will do, everybody, is once we post the recording and the notes later today, is we will post those on our website as well. And I'm actually going to take the screen back for just a second because I want to show where that is. I know we showed it in the intro, but it's not a bad idea to reiterate that. So are you seeing my screen? No, not yet.
I do not see your screen,
Okay.
but I can tell you that I also have my staff put these training documents together. They're the ones that use them all the time. They're the ones that tweak them. So it's valuable for them to work on these training documents too. It's not something that I mandate down, because some things I don't do very often. So I want to make sure I'm going to the best person, the person with the experience actually doing the job when I'm developing training documents or aiding somebody else in developing a training document.
Okay, so I'm showing right now where you will be able to find our past materials, and that's where this will be. Would you also be willing to share your 360 review if you have one? Do you have a
that you can, well, I can show you I'd be more than willing to share the questions that are on my 360 evaluation. Otherwise,
right.
I think that's Information Act. You could probably contact, the city or the municipality if you really want to see it. But yeah, I'd be more than willing to share some of the questions that I asked my team.
If you could throw those on a document, that would be great. Awesome. Okay, we are just about out of time. So again, I want to thank all of you for your participation this morning and for your questions. I also want to thank Dominic for his awesome presentation and ideas. As I mentioned in the pre-show of the pre-slides, Trustee Training Week is coming up August 13th through 17th. There's a program every day at noon that you can watch. And if you haven't encouraged your library trustees to view those, I encourage you to do that as well. So with that said, I hope you all have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week, and so long.
Thank you.